All right. Well, once again, welcome. My name is Mary Beth Gassman, and I am a professor at Rutgers University, and I am also the executive director of the Rutgers Center for Minority Serving Institutions. And we are sponsoring this event today along with the Association of Governing Boards, and we're very, very happy to have them as a partner. I also want to say thank you to ECMC Foundation for funding this event. It's incredibly important to have great funders in this world we're living in right now, so thank you to them. For those of you joining, this webinar is going to address strategies for fostering positive and collaborative relationships between MSI board chairs and board members and presidents, and which are really crucial for institutional stability and growth. And so we have some terrific people with us today. We have Michael Sorrell, who is the president of Paul Quinn College, which is a historically Black college in Dallas, Texas. And in full disclosure, I am also on the Paul Quinn board, so don't want to leave that out. And he is here with his board chair, Don Clevenger, who is the Senior Vice President and Chief Financial Officer for Encore Electric Delivery, and as I mentioned, the board chair at Paul Quinn. And we also have Ali Malikzadeh, who is president of Roosevelt University, which is a Hispanic serving institution in Chicago. And he is also a consultant with AGB and a board member from his board, Thomas Hyatt, who is the principal at Thomas Hyatt PLLC and counselor at law. And so that's our team today, representing historically Black colleges and universities and Hispanic serving institutions. And the way that this is going to go is I am going to begin with some questions. I have a variety of questions that I did share in advance so people could be prepared, but I also am going to open it up to questions, and you can put those questions in the Q&A, and our group is more than happy to answer any of the questions that you might have. So I'm going to start off with a question for both pairs. And that is, and whoever wants to go first, just show me a hand and we'll go ahead and do that. So the first question is, how do you define a positive board chair president relationship, and what are the key elements that really make it sustainable over time? And I'm asking that question because we know that sometimes where things go wrong is in that relationship. So how do you define a positive board chair president relationship? And just raise your hand if you'd like to go first. So otherwise I'll have to call on someone. Tom, you had a chuckle there. Would you like to start?
Sure. I knew I'd get punished for chuckling there. No, I'm happy to start. Thanks, Mary Beth. I think like all relationships, the key way to sustain it is by nurturing it, by not leaving it on the shelf and assuming that it will take care of itself, but really taking the time to prioritize that relationship and put the time and effort into making it a successful one. That means staying in touch. It means having open lines of communication, having anything being fair game on the table. No stupid questions, lots of stupid answers, but no stupid questions. And so always have the opportunity to entertain that. And then one of the things that Ali does very well with our board, for example, is he's very proactive, and it makes it easy for us to work with him as partners in that regard. We don't wait until the board portal gets filled with our materials. He will often send emails and texts, keeping us apprised of great enrollment numbers, or this is a concern that we're dealing with. I want you to know what we're doing, those kinds of things. So I think being proactive in that fashion is a key part of the relationship as well.
Thanks. Ali, do you want to comment?
Yeah, and as Tom mentioned, also developing a personal relationship with a board chair is critically important because it's really the two of you in the limelight as major representatives of the university. So I try to make it personal, have a good relationship, have a family relationship, but also respect each other's expertise. I think that's important to note. Mr. J.C. Gonzalez Mendez is a very successful businessman who's the chair of our board. And I really respect what he has done in his career. And I think It's mutual because he understands what I have done within the university and giving each other space to operate.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, I'm going over to the Paul Quinn team. Who wants to start?
Well, I'm going to show deference to my two-time board chair. That I would say respect is a critical component to in the relationship.
No, I think a lot of what they hit on is exactly right. Constant communication is, or I would say necessary communication is very, very important. Michael and I have never had set times to talk. I mean, in my own business, I find that is, anytime you have something like that, it almost becomes a time sink of, well, now he's got to come up with something. But he's on speed dial for me, and on my favorite, so it always rings through. He had on my cell, and if I possibly can, I take it because I know it's important. And he's very, very good about picking up the phone, weekends, nights. If we need to talk, we need to talk. And we have very honest, open conversations. It's always a safe space. And even if he needs to vent, which is also, I think, a very critical part that, some other, and I'm sure he never has any problems with me, but anybody he needs to vent for, he can obviously talk and we can talk it through. And it's not going any farther than that. But just really honest and open and communication whenever is necessary.
Yeah, and I would add that I trust Don, right? I mean, and I think that that's really, really important. I mean, I've been president for 18 years, and I think Don's been on the board 17.
That's right.
And this is his second time serving as board chair. And there's never a time where I've had to wonder if he wasn't fully committed to the school or if he wasn't always going to do right by me and my family. And I think those things are important. And I work very hard never to allow the college or our relationship to become a burden to him because he's got a big job. And I appreciate whatever time he allocates to us because, he's got his family, he's got his job. I mean, I just think that it's important to keep in mind you don't get to sit on the board, you don't get to be a board chair because you were unsuccessful in your day-to-day life, right? So I think you have to be respectful of that.
Thank you. That's a really good point too, right? You don't get to be a board chair or even on boards without being highly successful because that's the kind of people that you want, right? You want people who are connectors and can get you out there. So I was going to ask a question about communication and trust, but I think most of you sort of answered that. So I'm gonna, here's one thing I'm really curious about, and that is, how do you navigate moments of disagreement or tension while also maintaining sort of mutual respect and, most importantly, institutional focus? So, and I think I'll go back to Ali and Tom and see what you might have to say about that. Whoever would like to go first.
Well, if we have a disagreement between the chair and myself, of course, I win. But we know the truth. The reality is always, as was mentioned, have a safe space for us to talk and tell the truth and really reveal what is behind the issue of the disagreement and respect each other's expertise. Now, JC, as chair of our board, really doesn't want to get into the sausage making and the operations issues and so forth. And but strategic issues, strategic disagreements, absolutely we need to talk about it. And he speaks on behalf of the board. So it's really important for me to listen to that. And we have one of the national experts here, Tom Hyatt from AGB, who comes in and gives an absolutely first-rate seminar to the board on how to manage that dichotomy of strategic versus operational. And he has done that for us even last year. And that's very helpful because it kind of focuses everybody on their domain versus the domain of the university and the administration of the university.
Thank you. Yeah.
I think I'll just add on to that, Mary Beth. I think that's exactly right, Ali. And you don't want certainly the boardroom or the channel of communication between board chair and president to be an echo chamber. You want to air those things out. If there's tension or disagreement, you want to put that on the table and treat each other with mutual respect. But I do think, as you alluded to, Ollie, at the end of the day, if you have a disagreement on something and you're just not going to change your differences, then you come back to what is your role here? If your role is the president and you have executive responsibility and the decision that you disagree on is an executive decision, president wins. That belongs to the president to execute that decision. If the decision is about strategy, if it's about the strategic plan or something that the board has given direction on, and the president thinks, I'm not sure about that strategy direction, say, I respect your point of view, but this is the strategy that the board would like to see you execute, the board prevails in that case. So I think understanding and respecting those mutual roles is helpful to get through that.
Thank you. Thank you. And I think where a lot of the issues come is in that lack of understanding when, when people don't know their roles, right? That's where you see all of the strain, I think, and things that fall out into the public sometimes. So it's really good for people to know their roles. Okay, Michael and Don, let's hear what you have to say about what happens when there might be a moment of disagreement, and how do you maintain mutual respect and also focus on Paul Quinn?
Don, I'm trying to remember when we've had a
Me
moment of
too.
disagreement.
I mean, Michael and I probably had the most fortuitous start to this type of relationship, unfortunately, because we went through the absolute fire of actually having to, do some things to save the organization because of things before he got here. And so we trimmed down the board from a really massive number to something much more manageable as it is today, and really had to go through some fire. And, when you're in the trenches with somebody for a couple of years, you really come out with so much respect, and also just knowing their values and respecting their values. That, I mean, we've had debates, but it's like he'll take a side, then I'll take a side, and then we're like, yeah, that's kind of the way to do it. We've never really just had an out. I mean, I'll tell you, when he came to the board and me for the first time, I don't think I was chair. I can't remember. I think it was before the first time, and said that we were going to start doing an urban work college. We all went, I'm sorry, what now? But it turned out to be the absolute greatest thing, not only for Paul Quinn, but for the city of Dallas to get involved with Paul Quinn. And so that was when I thought, this is something that farms do, this or rural schools. And it turned out to be absolutely fantastic. But yeah, I agree, Michael. I struggle to think of anything we've really kind of come to odds over.
Yeah, I can't. I mean, the changing the school to urban work college was definitely one of the more moment conversations. The other hump moment was when we talked about COVID, and
Yeah.
I remember, like, I was kind of like, I think this is going to be a big deal.
Yeah.
And but other than that,
Yeah.
no, I can't think of any.
Yeah.
It helps also, I think, to be a good poker player, because to your earlier point, Michael, Ollie doesn't rant. I've never heard him rant in our time together. But if you look at his face, you can pretty much tell when something is bursting a vein down here, and read the word clouds over his head without him ever saying a word. So.
I should also jump in here, Marybeth, and mention that I've never met another president who has served for 18 years, okay, as Michael has. So this is quite an honor for me to see that. I've been in this job for 11 years and lost all my hair during these 11 years. So I want to ask Michael, how does he do it?
Oh, well, first of all, I don't have any hair. Now, my goatee is graying, right? Like, it was one color before I got this. But no, I think I'll say this. It is easy to stay a long time when you are mission aligned.
Yeah.
And I think when you actually, like, for me, I love my students, I love my school, and I tell folks, it's like I have the absolute right board for me,
Mhm.
right? They are, because I'm very entrepreneurial, and they understand that, and that is incredibly helpful. And I also understand my job is to always make them look good. So, I try to do that.
Thank you. Thank you. Michael, I'm glad you brought that, the entrepreneurial thing up, because one thing I'm always telling people, especially folks looking for new presidents, is if you say you want an entrepreneurial president, if you say you want an innovative president, you need to actually want that kind of president. You can't secretly want someone who's not going to be any of those things because you can't support the person if you aren't willing to, like I remember when you suggested the idea of the work college, which came out of your dissertation, right? And it was really out there, and not everybody would think to do that, an urban work college at an HBCU, but it ended up being a really, really good thing to do. And to have a board that trusts you to make those decisions it's really important. They trust your intellect. They hired you, they trust your intellect.
Well, and you bring a great point too, that I would say, the college was good enough to pay for almost my entire degree and did not require me to sign anything saying that I would stay, right? Which for someone like me pretty much guarantees that I'll never leave, right? Like, I mean, it's just because I function better in environments where there is trust. And it just, because it meant a lot to me to do that, for them to do that. So yeah, but I agree with Mary Beth. Like, if you want an entrepreneurial person, you've got to know what that means and be okay with it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love what you said about the fact that the institution really trusted you. I mean, so now you have this like deep trust, which is really great. So with that said, I have a question for the Paul Quinn folks, and Roosevelt folks, if you want to chime in, feel free. But my question is, in what ways can presidents and board chairs work together to ensure, and Tom kind of alluded to this, to ensure that the board is engaged at the right like strategic level without overstepping the day-to-day operations? Because we do know that that is one of the areas that becomes really slippery, right? So because I am on the board of Paul Quinn, one of the things that whenever people ask me about it, I'm like, it's so exciting to be on a highly functional board, and one that where you don't see a lot of that stepping into the day-to-day. And I'm just wondering, like, how do the two of you work together to ensure that that doesn't happen? Because sometimes you will see board members calling members of the staff and coming, you know what I mean, doing all of those kinds of things. We hear about that happening, but it doesn't seem to be happening at Paul Quinn. And so can you talk a bit about how you manage that and how you make sure the board knows what it's supposed to be doing and not supposed to be doing?
Yeah, I'll start, Michael. I say there's a little bit of reservation. I think it's good for every board to have at least, well, a fair percentage of people that have a board themselves to report to. Certainly, you don't want all corporate wonks. Don't get me wrong, but I think it does help Michael a lot that I have a board, a public board that I have to present to and deal with, and I know what it's like to be on this side of the fence, for one. And because if you've not been around boards or advised boards or understand that interaction, it is very easy to think, well, my job's to make sure nothing goes wrong. I'm gonna dig in and figure it out. And so then I think that really drives to one of, I think, the key positions of the chair. And I think I've only had to do this maybe once or twice, and that is step in between uh, the president and a board member who is overstepping, and explain to them as respectfully as possible. That's not how we work. We're nose in, hands out. And once you get yourself into the position of managing his staff, you've overstepped. And like I said, I think there's just been once or twice when that's really come up, and it's usually a new board member that thinks they're trying to do what's best, but it can be an issue.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things that I've noticed. One, people who are happy with what they're doing in their non-board life and are busy, right? Like, they're not looking to be a college president. They're not sitting there twiddling their thumbs. We have folks who have other stuff to do. And that that is just incredibly helpful. And to Don's point, I think about the boards that I sit on. Because I have a board, I am determined not to be the nightmare board member, right? I mean, it's like, listen, I understand what you're supposed to do. You go do your job. Tell me how I can support you in the institution. And we have those trustees. And so much so that, to Don's point, when we get someone who isn't like that, they really stick out like a sore thumb. And the rest of the trustees will work with them to sort of get them to understand, hey, and it's patience, right? Like it's understanding the arc of relationships, and being patient enough to let the arc work.
Thank you. I love that way of thinking about it. Tom and Ali, did you have any comments you wanted to make on that?
Now, I'll just say something quickly, Ollie, which is, go to the source. If you ever wonder, as a member of the board or as board chair, if you are micromanaging, ask the president. He or she will be glad to tell you if you're micromanaging or not. So no need to beat around the bush on that. I think it's very helpful for the board chair to very clearly understand that role, and then he or she can exhibit leadership with the rest of the board in showing what that looks like. One of the other things that we do from time to time, you'll recall, Ali, in our board development sessions, is we did an exercise where we went through several different kinds of decisions and simply said, as a group, strategy or management, and walked through them. And some of them were kind of trick questions, some of them were a little bit of both. But if you have some concrete examples to pour in, it makes it easier for folks to understand.
I love that. I love that. Ali, any comment?
Really nothing to add to that except that it's full transparency in that relationship and making sure everybody respects that. And, I like Michael and Don's comments regarding the role of the board members. Uh, from our perspective, and Tom has worked with me for a long time, is it's not board members asking questions during board meetings. That is their job, to ask questions. Some people in the administration may get flustered, but we have asked all the leadership team of the university that if a board member runs into you, whether it's chair or somebody else, and asks you a question about finances, about enrollment, whatever it is, first answer that question to the best of your knowledge. Then let me know so I can follow up with that board member. Okay, so the board doesn't need my permission to get the data they need to do their job.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so I'm gonna direct this question to the Roosevelt team. Just ask first, and Paul Quinn, if you want to chime in, please do. How do you balance transparency with discretion when discussing sensitive institutional issues with, like, as president with the board and board chair, and maybe as board folks with the president? So how do you kind of balance discretion? And I always have a lot of people ask me questions about this, about very sensitive issues on boards and what you're allowed to say. And of course, the public and private makes a difference, but just curious how you balance those issues of transparency and discretion on sensitive issues.
Well, I can start on that, and Tom, if you want to chime in, is, obviously, absolute full disclosure to the chair of the board. Let's say something happened that has really put the university at risk by a personnel, somebody within the university. And yes, I'll be on the phone almost immediately with the chair of the board. And then the two of us discuss, does this need to be disclosed to the executive committee of the board, which Tom is a member of that, and these are key leaders of the various committees of the board. And typically the answer is yes, at this level, let's send them a note, see if they want to have a Zoom call and a follow-up. And then hopefully we can resolve it and then disclose it to the rest of the board as something came up and we kind of went through a process and took care of it. Tom?
No, I think spot on, Ollie. And transparency is so critical to the trust in university governance, particularly in our unique system of shared governance, where the faculty are a member of that conversation as well. And so being transparent as much as you possibly can is critical to that trust and that ongoing relationship. But that said, trustees and the president, as well as an officer, have fiduciary duties to the organization. It's the duty of care and the duty of loyalty to ensure that you're protecting information that is confidential for any number of reasons. It might be a personnel matter, it might be intellectual property, it might be a business combination you're thinking about with another institution that would be really premature to let that out of the box before you're ready to have that conversation. So appreciating that as a fiduciary duty element is core. And then again, it never hurts, even though it may be seem incredibly obvious, just to reiterate when you're talking about things in a boardroom. By the way, folks, this is confidential. We've not discussed this with the faculty. We've not told the media about this, what have you, so that it's clear, typically coming from both the chair and the president, this is in the confidential box.
Paul Quinn, folks, any comments on that?
I don't.
No.
You good? All right. Okay, so here's another question. I'm curious about, and especially given all that's happening right now, how do you, and I'll direct this at Paul Quinn folks first. How do you jointly prepare for and respond to external pressures such as, political shifts, maybe financial challenges, public scrutiny? How do you do that? I assume you do that together, and talk a little bit about how you do that. And an example would be great if you had one.
Don, do you want to go first?
Go ahead. Go ahead. I can tell you got something.
So this is where I think it's important that you have trustees and staff that understand the historical perspective of the institution, right? Paul Quinn College was founded by the African Methodist Episcopal Church. The AME Church, for all of its history, has been extraordinary about standing up for what they believe is right. And that has not shifted, right? Now, they don't go picking fights, right? But if fights come to them, they are people who stand on their values. And I've seen that example time and time and time again. We are an institution that does right by our community, does right by our stakeholders, even when some of those moments are uncomfortable, right? I mean, we try to build on foundations that are legitimate and that are capable of being longstanding. And we will lose a battle to win a war. And I have so much respect for an institution and for people who have those values, because those, like, I'm that way, right? And so we, I think there are, I'm trying to think of some of the examples. I'll give you an example. We have been approached on a number of occasions by emissaries from the Koch brothers about, taking funding from them. That's just not something we're comfortable doing. And, Mary Beth is one of our trustees who's very vocal about that, right? And it's not to say this is no value judgment on people who have done it or whatever. I get it. But it just wasn't something that our institution was comfortable with. But it's a conversation that we had. And I still think it was the right thing to do. But in a lot of places, people have made other decisions because it was the right thing for them.
Thank you. Thank you. Don, any comments?
I said I think this is one of those where you do trust the president to know, well, first of all, like you said, we do have the AME history and the mission of the institution that, is very so much a guiding principle. But it's also, when we're talking about a college, different from a corporation, especially, it is a laboratory. It's a place to explore and develop your values. And so we do trust him a lot to let the students do just that, even when sometime we can sit over here on the eighth floor of a building in downtown Dallas and saying, why are they even wasting their time? Well, it's because they're students and they need to, quote, waste time figuring things out on issues that, that's are important to them. And so we trust him a lot to let them do that and explore those boundaries.
All right. Oh, I like that example too. Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. How about Tom and Ali? Any thoughts on how you prepare to respond to external pressures?
Tom?
Ali, the one that comes to mind, and it's one we've thought about a lot at Roosevelt as we celebrated our 80th gala this year, and talking to folks about how Roosevelt University came to be. And it was the quintessential example of a really an internal threat ultimately, and that the board at the time of the university did not understand the mission and the vision, the values that were held so dearly by our president and by our faculty and by our students. And they said, we want you to think about the university in a way that frankly was discriminatory. And our president and students and faculty said, we don't count that way. We're not going to do that. Whereupon they essentially picked up, left, and moved across town and started Roosevelt University. And so that social justice and that sense of values and mission, the kinds of things that Michael alluded to in his comments as well, is at the core of who we are and the DNA that we have. And when we get existential threats and external threats, it's not hard to look back and say, we've been here before. We've been through the most difficult of times and we regrouped and started all over again. So we understand our mission and vision and values pretty well at Roosevelt, and just try to come back to those North Stars whenever we can.
Yeah.
Thank
Hey,
you.
and can I say something real quickly? As someone who grew up in Chicago, um, I have so much respect for what you all have done with Roosevelt, right? I mean, I grew up, like I said, I graduated from high school in 1984. So, it's been interesting. And my sister actually has been an adjunct there. And so it's just impressive, right? Like it really is impressive. And I just didn't want to get too far along because we may get questions. And I just wanted to say that as someone who's seen it, kudos.
Thank you so much, Michael. Very kind.
Yeah, appreciate that. And I'll add, Marybeth, that to what Tom said, if you walk in our hallways and sample any students, no matter what their major is, what brought you to Roosevelt, they will invariably mention social justice. Okay, whether business, performing arts, history, pharmacy, you name it, because that's what brought them here. And if any of us forget that, they will remind us, whether it's the student government, whether it's the faculty senate, and so forth. So we have to practice what we preach. And really, that goes to the founding of Roosevelt University. And if you visit me on campus in the magnificent building behind me, okay, you will see a statement from Eleanor Roosevelt, the namesake of the university, and her husband, that specifically says that I wish every university did not ask for the gender, ethnicity, and national origin of the students. They should practice what Roosevelt College does. Okay. Of course, these days we have to abide by federal rules, but that's been our working model.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So we have a bunch of questions in the Q&A, so I think I'm going to ask some of those. So I'll start out, and thank you for the questions, and please add more. We would appreciate that. So here's a question, and this has to do with kind of all that's going on right now. In all the attacks on higher education, specifically against minority-serving institutions and programs, there seems to be a lack of defense of these institutions or programs from the boards in media. What are your thoughts on the state of these relationships, and what are we not seeing? Oh, anybody want to take that one? That was a heavy breath there.
The question is, where do we start?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll give you a minute to think about it, and then I'm gonna pick somebody, and it's probably gonna be you, Michael. No.
Well, in that case, let me get out in front of it. All right. Um, let me say this. I don't know if I think it is just the board's responsibility to be the voices of um I don't think it's just the board's responsibility to push back on these narratives, right? I mean, I think first of all, we have to acknowledge that this has been by design an overwhelming experience, right? That, higher education has been in a comfortable place for a very long time. And, the thought was it was always one of those entities that just existed outside of this type of intrusion. And so when you think that you're untouchable, um, you don't prepare for the types of issues that we're addressing. Um, I, I, I think it takes far more than just boards to stand up and say, "Hey, push back." I think it requires much, much more. And so to single any one aspect of it out, I think is unrealistic.
All right, other comments?
Well,
Anybody?
I would also say, yes, we live in a world now where everything is out there on a social media platform. Sometimes that is the worst way to respond. Oftentimes, there's a lot more that can be done in the past. In Texas, a couple of times have had to come up where you can do a lot more in a back room talking to the right people than you can ever accomplish on your Twitter feed.
Mhm.
Thank you. How about any, from Tom or Ali, any comments on that?
Just one thought, Mary Beth, is, we talk in boardrooms often about the importance of speaking with one voice on behalf of the university or college. That one voice might be the board chair or the president or a designated board member or even a director of communications on staff, what have you, so that that message is consistent and clear. And part of that is helping make sure that board members understand the issues that they're likely to get questions about. So spending some time in board meetings on board education around what's happening with HSI funding, what's happening with Pell Grants, is DEI really dead? Those kinds of questions, because it's such a third rail issue right now that if you're not prepared to answer those questions, it can be a difficult experience.
Thank you.
I'll add my 2 cents to that higher ed is under attack. And the competitive advantage of our nation is dependent on our higher ed. Okay, it used to be the school system as well. That's gone. Now it's higher ed. And, I go back to Michael's comment as well, that we weren't prepared for this kind of attack, but it's multiple attack at every front, and it's certainly existential at this moment. Okay. The other side of it, you're all aware, if we opened our immigration system to the 18-year-olds from across the world, every 18-year-old will aspire to come to one of our universities. Whether it's Michael's University or Roosevelt University or what have you. So that demand is there because we have been doing something right for generations and generations, but that is in danger right now.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Okay, so lots of questions. Here's one for the presidents. How do you manage expectations as a new president coming into a school that's facing major challenges? And how do you manage realistic versus unrealistic expectations? So both of you have been presidents a long time, which is not the norm in the country now. So I don't even know if you remember that, but let's see what kind of answer you want to give. So Ali or Michael? Ali?
Michael, may I go first on this one?
I am actually thrilled that you want to go first.
Well, obviously, for any of our colleagues who want to be presidents, I was talking to a group of them at AGB National Conference, and I said, we all learned that you should ask for the finances of that university if you're a candidate finalist. You should know the enrollment. You should look at the market information, and so forth. But I would add one other question, and that is, I would call the CDC in Atlanta and say, is there any global pandemic in the horizon that I need to know about? Because that would affect your presidency for the first year, 2, 3. Now we're coming slowly out of that fog. But joking aside, these external forces always affect us. With the pandemic, it wasn't that we couldn't make ourselves safe. We learned how to do that within 3 months or so. Online classes, hand washing, so forth and so on. But it was the families who were devastated. It was inflation, hyperinflation that took off. It was all of our students who didn't have jobs. And we needed to respond to that to preserve what we had. Otherwise, we would have to shut down like many of the restaurants and other places that lost their clients.
Thank you. Michael, what about you? How do you manage expectations, especially as a new president? I mean, you came into a lot, right?
Yes.
I
Yes.
remember.
The task I was given was to save the school. So, no pressure.
No
right?
pressure.
I think you always have to be very, very clear in your communications. What I have found is everyone's not always going to agree with you or like the decisions you make, but you can seek to help people understand why you make them and what the end goal is, the aspirational end goal is of doing so. And then you keep repeating that to people, right? You keep explaining it. And that's what I've always tried to do. I'm under no illusion that folks like it. But I don't know any other way than just to be honest. When I mess up, I tell people I messed up. Here's how I would have done that differently. And I don't deflect blame. I take ownership of it, because I think that's part of the way in which you gain credibility with folks. And then you just keep going. You just keep going.
All right, that's from Finding Nemo, right? Keep swimming. That's the truth though, right? If you just keep going and going and going, and sometimes you can swim yourself out of it. All right, here's a question. Are there key strategies for selecting and shopping around for board members? So why don't we start with Tom and Don on that, and Michael and Ali, if you have some comments, feel free. But are there key strategies for selecting or this idea of shopping around for board members?
Yeah, there sure are, Mary Beth, and it's a great question, and a couple thoughts on that in no particular order. But one of them is not waiting until it's time. It's treating it as an ongoing exercise throughout the year, having your pipeline full of candidates, not waiting to say, oh my gosh, we're down 5 directors, let's go find 5 people. It's not that easy. You want to make sure you're gauging enthusiasm and interest and bringing the right skill set onto your board. And a lot of times, Ollie knows this well, you reach out to someone and they'll say, I would love to be a part of Paul Quinn, but I don't have the time right now. I just don't have the bandwidth to do it. Come back to me in a couple of years and let's have that conversation again. It's an ongoing development thing. So you want to have a good board committee that works with the president on that and ensure that that pipeline is full. Another key element, this is on us as prospective trustees, is ensuring that folks have the bandwidth, and especially in higher ed these days, to understand that it is all hands on deck in a boardroom in a college or university right now. There's too much going on at any given moment of the day to mail it in or to show up once a quarter and start thinking about things. It's an everyday, all the time responsibility for trustees. So being honest with folks and say, look, there are lots of ways to serve the college or university other than serving on the board. We totally get that. You might not have the bandwidth right now, but we could bring you on in an advisory council or work with our fundraising and development team or do other things to involve you short of being on the board. But just making sure that that commitment is there is an important thing to do, I think, up front.
Thank you. Don, any thoughts?
Yeah, really hard to add to that. I mean, that's kind of the exact same philosophy. I mean, you do want to have a board of a lot of different opinions and cover your bases, around the region you serve and so forth. But there's a lot of things to think about. But it's hard to add to those comments.
All right, thank you, thank you. Michael and Ali, do you have any comments about that? Because sometimes presidents end up recommending people who the board might be interested in bringing on. What kind of role do you both play in that?
Ali?
I have done that through the years as we needed certain number of expertise or we had a deficiency in a given industry, whether it's technology, finance, law, what have you, healthcare. Occasionally, I have introduced new members to the process. And the good thing is we have a process. The nomination has to come in, then that person is vetted through our board membership, some of the administration, and several interviews with the board members as well. And ultimately, we bring it to the full vote of the board. Now, in the past 2 years or so, we have gone to a more systematic way of doing that. That we send out a call to the alumni saying, this is our process, are you interested? And so forth. And we've had very, very good members added to our board last 2 years because of that process.
Thank you. That actually is a really good lead into this question that was asked, which is how can the alumni better help the president and or the board?
Mhm.
So what do you think?
Oh, I was going to say, I think it's interesting. HBCU alums, I think, get a really bad rap. Folks tend to be very critical of how they engage and and I think they mistake that part of it is they're just really passionate about the experience that they had. And I think about, I went to Oberlin, Duke, and Penn, and I loved my experiences. It never would occur to me to get in a chat room or to call up and speak disparagingly or echo. I mean, that's just not what I would do, but it doesn't mean that I'm not passionate about it. But I think what I've noticed here in the 18 years was that early on, my alums, I would describe it, existed in a state of trauma, right? In that, it is traumatic to have the idea that your institution may go away. It is traumatic to understand that the institution that produced you wasn't run in a way that was sustainable. And what does that come back to say about you as an individual? And if you understand some of the places where our students come from, you can understand how that would have really created some of the responses that we got to some of the things we needed to do. And I can't tell you I always understood that early on, right? Because I think we all were in places that were emotionally raw. For me, it was, man, I'm trying to get this done and it's hard. And if we fail, and it was a lot. And I didn't have a lot of patience because the situation didn't lend itself to a ton of patience. But as we've gone on and the successes have proven to be accessible for everyone, it's changed the way a lot of the alums have engaged. And we also, I think, have done a better job identifying the alums who were difference makers, right? Whose voices resonate differently across the decades of alums. And we have a much different alumni model now that is, I think, yielding really positive results. It gives them a platform to be passionate, but also it gives us a platform to continue to run the institution in a way that allows it to be sustainably successful.
Thank you, thank you. What about Roosevelt? What can alumni do to support the president or the board?
Well, I'll mention this. Obviously, we have all kinds of programs where we listen to the alumni. We just recently ran a history uh, program where 2,000 of them send their Roosevelt stories and kind of chronicled where they're coming from. And of course, it's full of passion, and you need to bring a box of Kleenex to start reading these. It's just absolutely amazing. But there is one responsibility that we all have, the four people here on the panel, and that is to leave a university behind that is better and improved than what we found. So, a few years back, somebody mentioned that yeah, I graduated from that really famous um, Chicago University, and I just blurted out, wow, it's a good school. And his response was, well, actually, it wasn't such great school when I went there. But kudos to the team that through the years and decades built that university that now their alumni are proud of it. And I think that's the ongoing, 18 years, 11 years, however many years we serve, is to make sure that we get a feeling to the alumni that their degrees are appreciating rather than depreciating.
I like that. Thank you, thank you. There's a question about whether or not either of your schools have a governance committee, and if not, why not?
Tom can answer that question.
Sure, we do. I chair that committee on our board, and it's an essential committee for our board. And I think it's a real workhorse and power horse in most boards, even outside of higher education these days. It's an opportunity to have the board look at itself and govern itself and police itself and make sure that it is living up to its ideals, that it's living up to expectations around the board, that you're talking about the right things, that you're getting board education on things in higher ed that you can't assume everyone that comes to the table knows this is what's happening in higher ed right now, and these are the issues that they have to deal with. So I think that's an important mix of it. And uh, to your earlier point that we all talked about a moment ago, a good governance committee often includes the nominations function there. And that committee, again, year round, should be paying attention to keeping that pipeline filled.
Thank you, thank you. How about Paul Quinn? Is there a governance committee, and why or why not?
We do that through our executive committee, which does the same functions. It's nominating and governance, but we just call it the executive committee.
All right, great. Okay, so here's my last question before I'm going to close us out, but I think it's a good one. And we have one of the attendees saying that, so it looks like you have good positive relationships, and how do you make sure that everyone within your institutions understands kind of the message of positivity and the kind of message of the president and the board coming together for the good of the institution moving forward? How do you message that to faculty, staff, students, alumni? How does that happen? I'm assuming that presidents are primarily responsible. So, but if anyone would like to chime in, please go ahead. Very, very quickly though.
Michael, go ahead, then I'll give a quick remark.
I think, it's definitely part of the job of a president to be the chief messenger, right? And I think, you want to put forward a message of positivity, but you actually want it to be true.
Mhm.
So, I'm not gonna lie, right? Like, sometimes the message is more positive than others, okay? But I think that's okay, because I think if you stay focused on what do we do to make this a great experience for everyone, you get to a more authentic place and the message resonates. People don't want to be spun and they don't want to be handled. They want to be treated with respect.
I like that. I like that. Ali, what about you?
Quickly, I will mention it's a structure that we have. We have a university senate that is faculty and staff of the university. It also still includes SGA reporting to the senate. And what we have done in the past few years is invite the chair of the board of trustees, the chair of the finance committee of the board, and the chair of enrollment committee of the board come in and attend the Senate meeting and, make a brief remarks and then answer questions just the way I do when I go to the university Senate. And that has really resonated well with our membership because they see the message that is consistent from the administration and the board regarding the strategy of the university.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you to Tom and Michael and Ali and Don. Thank you so much for joining us, and to AGB for co-sponsoring, and also just thank you for all the questions from our wonderful audience as well. This is a really, really important topic. We do have more webinars coming up over the next year in this series, so make sure to join us. And we hope you learned a lot. Thank you so much. Thanks to Giselle and Jacinda, who are behind the scenes too for us. Thanks, everybody. We really appreciate you.